there, friends. Well, I'm really hoping to have a really encouraging video for many of you out there today. Today's topic of the video is going to be vertical gardening. Vertical gardening is definitely a trend that's on the upswing right now, and with good reason, because there are so many benefits to gardening vertically versus a traditional, just along the ground type style garden system. There are lots of benefits to growing and utilizing the up space rather than just utilizing the space that we have along the ground, because it really helps us to maximize the amount of space that we have. And many of us, like me, I live in the city, as you can probably tell by most of my videos. It's noisy in the background and whatnot. I have just over 1/10 of an acre here, and so I have to make sure that I'm using the space that I have available extremely wisely, because even with it being 1/10 of an acre, you've got the driveway and the footprint of the actual house, of course, and then I have a little kids play area on the side. I have a grassy area for the kids to play as well. So not all of the space that I have available is going to be able to be garden space, obviously. So the amount of space that I have is indeed very limited, but I'm not willing to let that get me down and make it so I can't grow all the things I want to grow, and I know that you can do the same thing too. And when I first started gardening, I had no idea, about the vertical gardening systems. And so, there were lots of things that I wanted to grow, but I never thought that I was going to be able to. Like, for the instance, the first few years I never grew pumpkins or, watermelon and stuff like that. I stuck to real basic things because it's all I thought I had space for. And then as time went on and I grew and, in my knowledge as a gardener, and I discovered the vertical gardening, methods, it really helped to be able to maximize the amount of space that I have available, and helped me to grow things that I never would have thought was possible. So, in addition to just maximizing space, like for instance, with the pumpkin, instead of just growing it in a spot and then having to have a lot of space for it to ramble around, when you're growing it up, it's going to be going up into the air rather than on the ground and take up a lot less space. Probably 1/10 of the amount of space that it would take if you were putting it in the ground with no trellis or anything like that. And you can use vertical gardening techniques for a lot of different plants, not just, certain vining crops and things like that. Lots and lots of different types of things can be gardened vertically. You may be vertical gardening right now and not even know it. So yeah, maximizing space is definitely the most important thing that I like about vertical gardening, but there are lots of other benefits as well. For instance, you have a lot less to weed. Like if you have a garden bed like this and you're growing upward rather than outward, not only are you maximizing your space, but you have a lot less actual space that you need to weed. There's a lot less space to rototill or to till by hand if you, are gardening in like a raised garden bed like this or whatnot. A lot less to water, a lot less to mulch, a lot more efficient when it comes to the watering as well. Because sometimes when you're watering and you have a lot of space where plants are rambling all over, it can be hard to tell where the plants are planted, whereas when you're vertical gardening, you know right where they are because they're growing up into the air. So it's a lot more efficient with not only the water, but also, the fertilizer, because you're only fertilizing or using compost right where the plants are and not everywhere where they're not actually growing, but they're also, growing out along the ground. So it's a lot more efficient than the traditional methods of gardening can be. And the plants actually end up healthier because they get increased sun. They shade, they're not shaded out by other plants because they're up in the air. They get more air circulation, which helps reduce diseases, especially things like fungal diseases, the blights and, things like that, or mold diseases as late blight goes. Lots of different things like that. It's easier to find insects rather than on the ground, If you end up with squash bugs, it can be a whole lot easier when they're right at your arm's reach. There's another thing that's really useful, is that it's a lot easier on the person who's doing it. Gardening can be labor intensive, but when you're harvesting and things like that off of a plant that's right in front of you rather than having to bend over to be able to harvest and look for the insects and all this different stuff, it's going to be a lot easier on us as well. So there's a whole lot of benefits to vertical gardening. And so I would like to take you around my garden and show you how I'm using methods in my own yard, and show you, maybe some efficient ways that you could start growing some things that you may never think were possible before, but you can with using the vertical gardening techniques. This of course isn't going to be exhaustive. I don't use all the vertical gardening techniques, but I do use several different types, and you can kind of get creative with it and try different things from there. So maybe you can get some good ideas from this. So here, let me show you around. Okay, so here's the first bed I want to show you. In the front here, I have pepper plants, and those are interplanted with some basils and some marigolds. Now that's not vertically gardened, it's just interplanting, which is actually a different topic, a whole different video really. But that's what that is in the front, and we are facing north. So back here is going to be back here is where you would want to put the trellis, because if you put it on the south side down here, everything behind it would be shaded. Now, of course, if you live in the southern hemisphere, you're going to want to reverse this advice, because the sun's going to be on the north side and not the south side like it is here in the US where I live. So it's nice and tall, as you can see. It goes way up there. There's lots and lots of room. It's early in the season still, so as these continue to grow, they'll continue to grow up this mesh trellis. And the cucumbers are actually going to grow straighter than if they were on the ground, because when they're hanging straight down, they grow nice and straight. And cucumbers, anyone who's grown them knows that they can be a little bit temperamental. They can be susceptible to getting certain types of diseases, especially with their leaves and things. And so this is really beneficial to them, to keep their leaves up off of the soil and in the air, where they won't be so susceptible to getting all those fungus diseases and the like. So let's move on to the next bed. This is my bean bed. It's one big giant garden bed full of nothing but beans. And this side I have some off-white looking ones. This side I have some purple ones, which you can see starting to grow, even though it's still fairly early in the season. And then these are green, and then the ones on the side, even though they don't look any different, are actually going to grow yellow. And so in the back of my bean bed, on the north side of it here, actually I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Now you can see the pole beans. I have another one of these trellises supported by just some 1x2s in this nylon netting, which is what I had for the other ones as well, for the cucumbers. And then I plant the pole beans along the back edge of it, and that grows up the trellis. Pole beans actually grow more food per square foot than these bush beans would. So if you have really limited amounts of space, then you would definitely want to make sure to grow pole beans. And they have more of a traditional beanie flavor anyway. I like both. I think they're both really good, and obviously I had the space. That's why I was able to make this whole bed nothing but beans. So it's working out pretty well, and I really like it. Definitely want to grow something tall though. If you're gonna, make some kind of a support system for your pole beans, make sure it's at least, 7-8 feet tall, because they grow really, really tall by the end of the season. If you put them on something really short, like some bamboo stakes or something like that, then they'll definitely not be very happy, because they won't have enough room to grow. Same with the cucumbers. Okay, so this bed, I have melons. So this one in the back is a watermelon, and then I have 2 cantaloupes. Those are the ones in the front, and then in the back I have a honeydew. So the way I do this is I plant one little plant right in the center, and then as it starts to grow, it starts to ramble along the ground, and then I actually take the plant itself and tie it to this little tripod thing. If you can see, they just go up into the air, and then they're tied at the top there. So as this growing season goes on, and I need to tie these actually, they've grown since I tied them, they start to grow out, and then you're going to take them and tie them into the pole. And then as they continue to grow out from there, you're going to take them and tie them to the other pole, and you just keep wrapping them around and around until throughout the whole season. And you got to start early, train early and train often for sure. But throughout the season they'll grow, and then they'll flower obviously, and as they are right here, and start to grow their little fruits. And you do have to support them, so I'll hopefully try and do a follow-up video to show you how I do that. But sometimes, maybe just like some kind of a little sling or something like that. Sometimes if they're not too big, you don't have to support them. One thing to note though, because melons can be a fairly large variety to grow, if you're going to grow vertically for these types of things, you got to make sure you're choosing small type fruits. Like this one is, this watermelon is going to be one of those small, I think it's called a sugar baby, and they're like those ones you get in the grocery store that basically fit in one hand. They're kind of on the smaller side. You're not going to be able to grow something really big like a black diamond up a trellis like this. So if you want to grow them, you know, at home, and you don't really feel like you have much space, then perhaps growing the smaller variety is better than not being able to grow them at all. And then for these, I forget what two varieties I think I have. Minnesota Midget and, gosh, if I can't remember, I'll just add it to the video here on the screen. And then a small honeydew as well. So that's how these work. And then the back one back here is basically the same, except this is growing winter squashes. Now I definitely need to tie these up. As you can see, they're growing quite a bit from the last time I tied them, so I need to make sure to go ahead and tie them up the trellises to keep them growing up. But here in this bed I have a spaghetti squash, 2 butternut squashes, and a pumpkin. So you know, as messy as it looks, I guess I should have tied these up before I showed you, or maybe I'll just show you that later in the video. You know, just keep tying them up and keep twisting them around, and then you can grow lots of winter squashes. And in the amount of space that I would probably be able to plant, not even 1 plant, I'm able to get 4. I mean, literally, I would need double this amount of space, just this one garden bed, for just one of these plants. I've grown them traditionally before, and they take up tons of space. They just ramble and go all over the place. Yeah, see, this one right here spilling over the garden bed. Need to make sure to get this one tied up here soon. But yeah, they will. They'll go and take over the whole thing if you're not careful. So again, train early and train often. And now here's a really easy one that probably most of you are already using. This is one of my tomato beds. Tomato cages. Tomatoes would just traditionally grow on the ground if you just plant them there and don't use a cage, but using the cage keeps them upright. It keeps their foliage from getting diseased, and it keeps their fruit from getting diseased as well, and helps to keep the insects and all the other foliar diseases and things like that away. So just a regular ordinary tomato cage. This is a method of vertical gardening. You just got to keep the stuff inside the little cage there and keep it growing up and into the air. Keep it nice and healthy. And I would say they're doing pretty well. I have one that isn't doing as good, that one right there. But all the rest of them seem to be doing really well, so yeah. If you're using tomato cages already, you're a vertical gardener and didn't even know it. Okay, so here's the next example I want to show you, and this is what I call my zigzag trellis. It's basically the same as the other trellises in that I use 1x2 lumber in the corners, plus this nylon netting, except this time I'm not using a nylon netting doubled in height. I'm just using the regular nylon netting, which is I think 3 feet wide. So when I used them in the backyard, I used 2 of them, one on top of the other, to make it a total of 6 or maybe a little more feet tall. This is only going to be like 3 feet tall. So what I have growing on these is peas, little pea plants. Probably no peas to show you because my kids love these and they're really good about making sure they're picked. But anyway, so it's just the same thing, just a lot shorter. And so the peas get planted along the bottom edge, and then they grow up this little trellis. This would definitely not work for anything else other than the peas because, again, it is so short, but peas don't grow to be tall, so you really don't need a big trellis for this. Because this trellis zigzags like this, each one of these beds is actually 10 linear feet worth of peas squeezed into a small little bed with these little zigzags. And then I have some interplanting, again, that's another video. I have some beets and some marigolds and other things interplanted in with these peas because they take advantage of the vertical space and those grow near the ground, so it's just more efficient. So here's another example. Here's a good 10 feet worth of linear peas, and here's a second bed with another 10 feet of linear peas growing up and vertically. Another quick example of vertical gardening would be taking advantage of the space that we have up on walls in different spaces like this. This is just a small example of a window box. Obviously, I have some herbs in here. This is basil, some purple basil, some flowers and things just to look pretty. But this takes advantage of space that isn't in the garden and is up on the wall instead. So you can grow a lot of different things in containers and things if you're growing them up on the wall. Okay, so here's one last example of a different way to make the most of your space. This is a contraption. It's kind of behind my tomato plants. It's hard to see here. but I call it a double-decker pea planter. We're actually on the other side of my greenhouse right here. This is the greenhouse wall, and I built it to fit in this space of the greenhouse on the inside so that I could make the most of the space that was inside of the greenhouse. Well, of course it's summer right now, so I have it on the outside of the wall here. And so I make a little trough thing. Actually, this was made out of some untreated fence pickets. And then I made a little trough thing at the bottom where the peas get planted in that soil, and then I stapled this fencing on the back of it, and so when the peas start to grow, they grab onto the little fencing and then they grow up. And then I have actually 2 layers of them, one on top of the other, making this big thing into a big old, double-decker pea planter. So this makes the most of a little bit amount of space by, stacking the plants one on top of the other and using the trellis there to make it grow upward. Okay friends, so there you are. Again, this wasn't by any means an exhaustive list of different ways that you can use to use vertical gardening in your own yard to maximize your space, but hopefully this was able to at least give you a few ideas on some different ways that you could do some of this in your own garden to help things to grow up instead of out, in order to maximize your space, and a whole lot of other benefits as well. So I hope you found this video helpful. My name is Frugal Green Girl, and thanks for watching.